Are you ready to scale and outsource your business?
Okay, let's go.
Welcome to the Outsourcing and Scaling Show. I'm your host, Nathan Hirsch, a show where we talk about everything Amazon, Shopify, e-commerce, and digital marketing. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Outsourcing and Scaling Show. Today, my guest is Max Kerwick. Max, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Nathan. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. For those who don't know, Max has spent his entire career dedicated to helping businesses, both existing businesses with cash flow, products and services, and new businesses just starting out. He helps them uncover who their best customers are, what messages those customers want and need to hear to come back for more, and develop innovative marketing strategies to bring those messages to life in market. He does that through consulting with brands as the president of Brand Builder Strategy and co-hosting the Brand Builder podcast with Ryan Daniel Moran. You guys know him from capitalism.com. Past experiences include developing brands and helping raise money for many venture capital funded technology companies and e-commerce brands, as well as working directly with private equity and venture capital firms before and after investment is in portfolio companies. That's a lot, and we're going to dig all into that.
It is a lot. It is a lot. But to say that in plain English, I'm a brand strategy guy. I help people figure out what the story of their business is, what the story that their customer is trying to tell about their life, and how those two things play together so that they can scale their brand, usually across channels. My most typical customer at this point is, that kind of 7-figure Amazon seller that's trying to scale up Shopify, trying to get into retail, do things like that.
I love it. I want to talk all about that, but first, let's take a gigantic step back.
Perfect.
Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Give us a peek inside growing up. Were you a straight A student? Were you a rebel?
Yeah, man. So growing up, honestly, yes. To me, entrepreneurship was, my dad was a consultant, and he's a different type of consultant to me. He's a PhD statistician, and help people wrestle with huge amounts of data before big data was a trendy word and all that kind of stuff. But just seeing his path as kind of the entrepreneur and the person, he had a small business that was mainly built around his expertise, and worked with clients all over the world and all that kind of stuff. Versus my mom, who was kind of the classic corporate warrior, worked in tech, early employee at Dell and all that kind of stuff. And just seeing the kind of the two paths, how they could run in parallel, but one was totally different than the other. I knew that I always, basically from the age I was like 14, 15, I was like, okay, that's more the path that I want to take. And yeah, I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial mindset and always been interested in that for sure.
So what was your first entrepreneurial venture?
Oh God. These feel like so kind of cliche. But when I was in middle school, I used to mulch all the yards in my neighborhood. We had like a 30 house kind of mini pocket neighborhood, and I'd walk around and I think it was like it cost like $100 to get a pallet of mulch delivered, and then I could, with what I charged, I could end up making about $1 per bag of mulch. So which for like a 12-year-old, you're walking out at the end of the day and you got like $85 in your pocket. Like that was pretty good for a day's work. And so like over spring break, I would just mulch all the yards. Right. And then I was always a swimmer growing up, just sold the shit out of swim lessons, especially as I got better. I ended up swimming in college. And so I had, just at least in my, my immediate community, that was like my way of like parlaying my like, oh, that guy's good at swimming. And so like I'd teach little kids swim lessons and stuff like that. But yeah, those were my early ventures.
I feel like doing hard labor as a kid just makes you never want to do hard labor. And
oh my God, it's the worst. It's the worst. I live in Austin, Texas now, and I grew up in Austin, Texas. And Austin in April is awful. It is so hot. It is like, you're just in wheelbarrows full of mulch and, spreading them out with shovels and stuff. I try to get friends to come help me so I could hit more houses in one day. And usually they would only help for like 1, maybe 2 days. And then they'd be like, yo man, I'm sorry. Like I'm taking this money and I'm out. Like,
fast forward the story a little bit. How'd you get in with Ryan Moran? Walk us through your first real entrepreneur journey outside of being a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started off my career just in consulting, right? And I was working for a consulting firm, doing essentially what I do now, where I was, I have kind of a research background, but I also have a journalism degree. And so brand was kind of where I found the intersection of those things. I go out and I actually do research with customers. And then I take those insights and use them to actually write messaging and, come up with kind of the story of that brand and everything. And I was doing that for a small consultancy here in Austin. And I met Ryan randomly through a mutual friend. And at the time I had no idea that this e-commerce world even existed, right? I was working with companies that, typically were tech companies. They had either raised 8 figures of venture capital, or they were doing $50+ million a year in revenue. And I just couldn't see a way, as like a relatively young guy at the time, like how I could get into that just on my own, right? Like I couldn't walk into those rooms at 26 and be like, hey, you need to hire me as a consultant, right? I didn't have enough gray hair. I didn't have, a huge team behind me or whatever. But then I found this e-commerce space, and I met Ryan, and we gelled a lot. We had, very similar kind of views on building brands and what that meant for both the company and the consumer and all that kind of stuff. And then I found that there was just this huge need where when you're building a business on Amazon, if you're not actively building your brand, you're actually just building Amazon's brand, right?
Right.
And so all these people who would build extraordinary businesses on Amazon, up $5-10 million, right, with very, very few employees. And then they would try to sell that business, and they were a single channel business with a lot of risk, and they wouldn't get nearly the multiple that they were looking for. Or they would try to, okay, I'm going to start selling on my own website, but they had no idea who their customer was or how to market to them or whatever. And so I just saw a huge kind of need in this space for the type of work I was doing, and a lot more freedom. Tech companies are interesting. The challenges that they're solving are interesting, all that kind of stuff. It's glamorous in the sense that there's a lot of venture capital money, but they're mostly assholes, and they mostly are have a very, very overinflated sense of their own self-worth. So I going from that to working with actual profitable cash flowing businesses, delivering physical products to people, was a really cool shift for me.
So let's talk about the brand, because I feel like that's being pushed right now. You got to build a brand, brand, but people look at it and they're like, all right, Amazon's my moneymaker. For me to put money into Shopify or some other channel doesn't make a ton of sense when those Amazon sales are right there, but you got to build your email list. You don't want Amazon to control the customer. What does building a brand mean to you? And what's the first step when you're a 7-figure seller that's really just done Amazon so far?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So a lot of people think when they hear the word brand, they kind of think of what I call brand with a little b, which is oh, okay, this is my logo, my color palette, and maybe a nice story that someone wrote me that's going to be the foundation of my marketing. And that's not at all what I'm talking about. Those are pieces, those are aspects of it, right? Those are things that people come into contact with. But when I talk about brand, I'm really talking about the relationship that you have with your customer, right? And so that is anything that they might come into contact with. That is how you deliver customer service. That is what your website looks like. That is the products that you sell, and the quality and the packaging and the way that experience is delivered. That is any ads that you might run into. All of that kind of wrapped up together is the brand, right? Because that's the way that the customer experiences it. And I totally hear what you say, right? If there is more low-hanging opportunity on Amazon, and that is your only goal is to increase cash flow in the short term, right? Absolutely don't go plow a bunch of money into brand. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't align with your goals, right? But if your goal is to increase the multiple of sale and the value of your business when you go to sell it, then you need a brand, right? Because you can't sell on your website the same way that you sell on Amazon. You can't sell in retail the same way that you sell on Amazon. Most people, what I refer to as the Amazon entrepreneur, their understanding of how to sell product is they just throw it up on a marketplace, give away a bunch of shit for free, and then sales just magically start coming in, and then they just ride that and launch more products. If you try to do that in retail, if you try to do that on your own website or whatever, you're just going to just eat dirt the whole time. And so if you want to build a multi-channel business, you want to build a business that is a legitimate asset to, any kind of acquirer, then you need a story. You need something that is going to appeal to customers at a level beyond just the logical, okay, I'm looking for this product. This one ranks highly and has good reviews, so I'm going to buy it.
So what kind of process is that? Is that a 3-month process? Is that a 2-year process? And I know it's ongoing, but what does it really take to pivot the average Amazon business to not just be an Amazon business?
Yeah, so the average process does take probably between 3 and 6 months. The first and sorry because I skipped over your last part of the question on that. The first thing that you have to do is go and find your customer and figure out who they are,
Got
right?
it.
And so that is always the first thing that I'm helping people do. Like that. Let's say, okay, I'm pull some numbers from a client that I had recently, right? A guy who does about $2 million a year, sells a product that is probably around $20. It's technically a consumable, but most people only buy it once. And in the previous year, he had 50,000 customers, right? When I ran like retargeting ads and stuff to try to get people to take a survey or sign up for interviews or whatever, the response rate that I had on that to the list of 50,000 that we had was like something less than 0.01%.
Jeez.
Right. And that's like with his branding, that's with the product that they bought in the ad, everything like that. There is no relationship there. People have no relationship. They either didn't like the product and don't want to participate, right? Or they don't even remember that it was there in the first place, right? They might, oh, that's just something I don't remember buying that, or I don't remember buying that brand or whatever. And so, but from the people that did respond, we got several hundred people in there, and that kind of data provided some like really invaluable aha moments where it's the kind of thing for if you had a different type of e-commerce business, or especially a brick and mortar, right, would be a no-brainer, right? You'd be seeing people come into your store. You would know exactly who they are, what types of things they ask about, all that kind of stuff. Instead, what you have is like just money coming in and you're like, oh, this money is great. I love this money. Oh man. Oh, but I don't know anything about the people who are giving it to me, or why they're buying it, or what the story they're trying to tell about their life and how this product plays a role in that story.
And how specific do you need? Is it like, all right, females from the age 20 to 30, or does it get way more specific than that?
Way, way, way more specific than that. So, because think about that. Like, so females from the age 20 to 30, how many women do you know between the age 20 and 30?
Pretty good, a good amount.
A good amount, right? How similar are they? Like across the entire board, there's probably some things that are pretty similar, but for the most part, right? Some people are super outdoorsy. Some people travel a lot. Some people are homebodies. Some people go out. Some people don't. Some people eat healthy. Some people eat like shit. Like, they're the common threads that bind people together are so much more often around interests and around lifestyle than they are around age, demographics, location, things like that. There's some exceptions, right? You sell baby products, right? Most of your customers are probably going to be new moms.
Right.
So there's some things there, but again, that's so much more around lifestyle than it is around age. Some people have, their first kid at 20. Some people have their first kid at 38, whatever. And the story that woman is telling about her life is probably very different at that point. And so like the more you can niche down, the more you can understand exactly who that person is, what they care about, and where they're trying to get in their life. The more specific your marketing can be, and the more specific your products can be in addressing their problems and things like that.
So it sounds like you're saying it's all about the data. How do you get that data?
Yeah, so this is the part that if you're a big enough business, you can do it. You can pay to do it quickly, right? You can go out and you can retarget people that have been buying from you. You probably already have some sort of email list that you can go out. You can just try to go out and use the customer facing assets that you have to get as much data as you can, and then just use that to inform like, okay, how are we going to develop this brand? How are we going to change course? How are we going to make this compelling enough that people want to buy it outside of the Amazon ecosystem? So that's if you're at a larger level, right? And that's kind of the process that I typically work on with people. But regardless of what level you're at, it needs to be something that's ongoing anyways, right? So the easiest first step that people can take, and you can do this if you're starting your business right now, is set up your customer service process to allow for like some ongoing data collection, right? Include somewhere between 1 to 3 questions, just simple questions that you ask on like, hey, once you've solved their customer service issue and you've done it in a great manner that leaves them, really satisfied with the experience, whether or not they ended up liking the product, instead of asking them like, hey, what'd you think about the product, right? Ask them something about themselves, right? Ask them why they bought the product. Ask what the what was going on in their life that they thought this product was going to be a good thing to buy, right? And just try to understand a little bit more about who they are and why they bought the product, as opposed to like, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I ask, how did you like the product? And they just say, yeah, it was good. I'm like, yeah, that's because it was a bad question, right? Like you need to ask those open-ended questions, kind of let them tell a story about themselves and all that kind of stuff. And you'd be surprised at how helpful that information can be as you collect it over time.
So let's turn our attention more to the marketing piece, because I feel like a lot of people get overwhelmed. Like you said, with Amazon, you throw the product out, money comes in, sales comes in. Marketing is that component besides Amazon PPC that you don't really need to worry about. Outside of Amazon, you got Instagram, you got LinkedIn, you got Facebook, you can go on and on. How do you figure out what the right channel is and where to invest your time? And is it something where you're doing one at a time and growing? Are you going into a bunch at once? What's your best strategy for that?
So a couple things. Never go into a bunch at once if you can avoid it, right? Like I always recommend kind of like focusing on a channel until you can make it profitable, until you can at least make it break even, right? If you jump into retail at the same time as you start spending $10,000 a month on Facebook ads, you are going to be in the red for a while.
Right.
And that's just, I mean, if you have the funds to do that, if you have the stomach to do that, then great. I've seen some people that do that when all of that stuff all of a sudden clicks, their business becomes insanely profitable and they're able to just that growth, they get that hockey stick part of their growth curve, which is great. But for most people, it's like, okay, you've figured out Amazon, right? You have a sales acquisition channel, not a customer acquisition channel for the most part. It's a sales acquisition channel, right? So then how can you reinvest that cash that you have coming in to a customer acquisition channel, right? How can you go and take, if you're going into your website, for example, looking at, okay, marketing is really difficult, but if you have a story, if you understand who you're going after, if you understand who's been buying your products and what you're going to, and why they're buying them, what they're trying to tell about their life, right? How are you going to go out and find new versions of that? How are you going to go out and find where those people live in the real world? And then looking at it truly as not just sales acquisition. This is the biggest issue that I see from people going from Amazon to any other sales channel, right? Is they're used to thinking about profitability as like, okay, I acquired one sale. Was it profitable on that sale? If you can figure out how much that customer is worth across their lifetime with you, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, however you want to define it, then you can afford to go out. Marketing all of a sudden becomes much easier, right? Because this person is worth $100 instead of $20. Most people can't acquire customers profitably if they're only making $20 off them. But if they're coming in and they're buying 4, 5, 6 products, or they're buying one small product and then a higher ticket item or something like that, then it's much, much, much easier to then go about and figure out how to do marketing profitably.
That makes a lot of sense. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see when people are growing and scaling their brand outside of Amazon?
So the biggest mistake I see is that they treat the other sales channel like Amazon. So either their idea of a compelling Facebook ad is to literally just put like the product image with 5 stars and a certain number of reviews and literally just try to recreate their Amazon listing essentially. And then that just like appears in someone's Facebook feed and they're like, well, I guess Facebook ads don't work anymore. This is bullshit. I put, $20,000 into that. And they have a $15 product and it never works, right? Like if you did the math on that for, 10 minutes, you would be able to figure out, I'm never going to be able to sell this $15 product at a level that is going to make this channel profitable for me, right? And then retail too, right? A lot of people don't understand, like when was the last time that you walked into a retail store, saw a product or brand that you had never heard of before, and then bought that product in the first go?
Yeah, I don't think that's ever happened.
Exactly. So the traditional marketing funnel of like generating awareness, giving them enough information to get into their consideration set, and then being there at the point of purchase, like that's what you need to do to be successful in retail, right? And a lot of people don't understand what that takes and the level of work that takes, and working with the retailer and the distributor. And there's just a lot more levels to that. And all of those things require a really solid understanding of why someone would want to buy your product in order to do it successfully. So that's the main thing I see is people are like, oh, I'm selling really well on Amazon. I should be in retail, right? I should be in Target. And like one of the worst things that can happen is that you get in target and you don't have any of the things that you need to be effective in target. And so you end up just losing a bunch of money, with products that they end up having to mark down and sell on clearance or do something like that.
It is interesting. You do have to get out of that Amazon mentality and more into kind of almost like building a community. You want to figure out who the right people are, figure out how do you get them in your community, how much does it cost to get them in your community, how much are you going to make with them on their community. And I definitely think that that's where all this is going. Unless you have anything else there, I wanted to shift into, this is the outsourcing and scaling show. So I want to talk a little bit about hiring. I know you've hired people over the course. I know you work with Ryan, who's obviously hired a lot of people, and you just interviewed me about my hiring tactics. I'd love to hear yours, what you look for in people and what you've seen have success over time, especially as it relates to building brands and growing real scalable businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the hiring that I do is in more creative fields, right? I'm a strategy guy. My work is going out and collecting the data and figuring out, I do the creative to the extent that I write kind of the strategy, high level messaging, all that kind of stuff. But most of the hiring that I'm doing is for, graphic designers, for people who are running ads, for, people who are doing more specific copywriting, say they're writing listings or, whatever it is. And it's funny because you talked about this when I just interviewed you, right? But the interviewing for communication and interviewing for skill, like I want someone who is really, really, really good at what they do, but I also want someone that can communicate where they are not comfortable, right? So someone who, when I give them like kind of like, okay, here's the strategy that we're doing, all that kind of stuff, and lay that out for them, I want them to be able to say like, okay, yes, I get this, and ask intelligent questions. Things that make me think about things differently, things that make me, okay, I hadn't thought about that. We need to go back and clarify that or whatever. But then also people who are like, this is a bad idea, or I don't understand this and this is outside of my skill set. I'm not going to do this. Because I think some of the worst failures I've had in hiring are people who are like, I hire to do one thing and they end up having to do something slightly different. And then whatever the end product is like, okay, great. Well, I'm going to have to hire someone to fix this for another $5,000. So,
I'm glad you brought up creatives. I feel like that's where a lot of people struggle to hire because they have these ideas in their head of what they want. You've got someone here who's good at designing what they want, but they can't get that information out of their head to that person in a clear way to get what they want. What tips do you have in just communicating with creatives to get them on the same track in the way that you want to go?
Yeah, so I see this so much with clients, and this is something that I really, really struggled with early in my career. And like managing creatives when you have no experience managing creatives can feel impossible because it's like they speak a different language.
Yep.
Like words are coming out of my mouth. I can tell they're the wrong words. You're nodding, and then you're coming back with something that I hate, and I can't tell you why I don't like it. Right? I always call it rock fetching, where it's like you get in that cycle of, I can't really tell you what I want, but I want a rock. Can you go get me a rock? And they're like, they come back and they're like, well, what about this rock? And you're like, no, that's not the right rock. Go get me a different rock. And then you get into the cycle, and that's where like everybody's losing money. So what I always tell people is start out as much as possible with giving them an idea of who your customer is, right? And what other types of brands they buy, right? Is this person a Whole Foods shopper? Are they a Target shopper? Are they, if it's a woman, does she wear Glossier makeup, or does she wear, this? Like, give them some reference points so they can kind of understand like the visual language that you're going after. And then when it comes to giving feedback, as much as possible, like I always take screenshots and just like draw a line of like, I don't like this because of this reason. I like this because of this reason. I need this to look more like this, another reference image or whatever. Like take as much of the guesswork as possible out. And if you don't have the ability to communicate that in words, then you need to communicate it in pictures, because that's the only way they're going to get it.
I love that. That's a great tip for those of you listening. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a client who will just respond back saying, this is not good. This is not what I want. And the freelancers there, like, I want to make sure you're happy. I want to get what you want, but I don't have any information. I have nothing to go by. And that screenshot, like you said, really takes the guessing out of the equation. Is there any bad hiring experience, any horror story that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, actually, I want to go back real quick though
Yeah.
to something you just said. Writing, this needs to pop more is not constructive feedback. Right? That's one of my biggest pet peeves with clients is when they're like, oh, I just want this to pop more. I just want this to stand out more or whatever. You need to be very, very specific with what you mean when you say, like, does pop mean it needs to be louder? It needs to stand out more? Does pop mean that, like, you need to be very clear about what that means and what your expectations are. And again, probably link it back to some images or you're just going to get back more of the same.
Yeah, and you got to remember that the freelancers work with different clients. Pop could mean different things for 5 different clients.
Exactly. It's like quality, right? Quality means different things to different people depending on what you're talking about, what category you are. So it's the same kind of thing with design. Different words usually mean different things, and you need to be very clear about what you mean by them.
Exactly.
Yes. Let me see hiring stories. So actually, all of my nightmare hiring stories are when I've hired full-time employees, not when I've hired freelancers.
You can still share it.
Yeah. So my biggest mistakes in hiring and my biggest regret has always been when I've said, you know what, I'm going to hire a generalist, someone who doesn't fresh out of college that doesn't really know what they're doing, and I can just coach them up. And like, goddamn, that is just an absolutely awful idea in my experience. Maybe if you're in a larger organization, you have a lot of SOPs and things like that. But for the work that I do, that is basically means that I've added a full-time teaching job onto my existing job. And it's just like, I never have the time to do it. I don't have the processes in place and all that kind of stuff. And it just never works out well, like for me and my business, and it never works out well for them either. So I'm pretty much on I try to find someone who is better than me at least one thing so that I can point to them saying like, okay, like this other stuff is still a work in progress, but you're a badass email marketer and you're doing a really good job on that. And you've cleared that off my plate. For someone who doesn't really know what they're doing at all, right, and is just smart and eager, like, I don't know. And again, in a bigger organization, I could probably take better advantage of that person. But as it is right now, I'm just like, I don't know what to do with you.
Yeah, 2 things off that. I mean, one of the biggest fights Connor and I got in back in the day is he kept trying to take people and turning their weaknesses into strengths. And he would just invest time and time and time. Like, you got to stop doing that. Almost never do you get an ROI on that investment.
Yeah. I have one time that's worked out, and she was the best person that's ever worked for me. But I have 5 times when it was awful and I lost a lot of money and that person had a really terrible time. So,
Yeah, and the other thing is, this happened this morning. Someone's like, "Oh, I don't think I need a virtual assistant. I think I need an intern." And I was like, "All right, Free Up doesn't have interns, and you're welcome to go find an intern. But let me tell you why hiring an intern is probably not what you want." And very similar to me hiring college kids back in the day, it's just, first of all, it's not their number one priority, and second of all, like you said, you're just going to invest all this time, and then they can just go get another job, and you might as well just get someone that will do what you need up front right when you need them.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had, interns. It's like, I was an intern at one point. I loved the experience that I got or whatever, but I was never very loyal to those places. So, from a hiring perspective, like, I definitely think that you're better off hiring someone where the terms are a little bit more upfront and everybody knows what they're getting into and there's a little bit more value on both sides.
Absolutely. Max, what are you most excited about in 2019, and where can people hear more about you?
Man, what am I most excited about in 2019? Well, I'm going to take a non-business answer. I'm getting married in 3 weeks. So that is what I'm most excited about.
Congrats. I actually just got engaged 2 weeks ago. So we're becoming adults slowly.
Yes, slowly, but surely. Yeah. Well, good luck with all the wedding planning. I'm glad to only have 2 weeks left in my my planning process. But yeah, and then, in terms of content, I have the Brand Builder podcast on the Capitalism Podcast Network. And so you guys can check me out there. And then you can always go to my website, brandbuilderstrategy.com, if you want to get in contact with me.
Awesome, Max. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'm sure we'll be in contact. Have a good rest of the year.
Yeah, you as well. Cheers.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Did you enjoy this content? If so, click like, leave us a comment, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you great content all about hiring.